Well, that sucked, didn't it? Nashville Predators embarrassed 6-1 by the Los Angeles Kings. What in the world went wrong? And why were the big guns noticeably outplayed by the Los Angeles Kings? Plus, Western Conference Wednesday. We've talked a lot about the Preds trade deadline stuff, but what about the other teams that the Preds are going to be competing with? Who are some of the stars that stood out, and who are the teams that missed some opportunities? All topics we're going to bring up today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
Your Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Predators. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer and editor at ontheforecheck.com, and I have a partner in crime who is very happy that she didn't stay up till 1:30 in the morning to watch all this nonsense.
Yeah, it spared my eyes, but I heard it and it hurt my ears. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at ontheforecheck.com.
Yeah, that was bad.
Yes.
If you're the superstitious type, this is like the game you would go and burn your game film of. Like bury it in the back of your practice field, or in this case, the practice rink, which I guess would be hitting center ice with an ice pick and then filling it up with water and I don't know. Somebody else.
You got to do something.
Somebody else who's good at rink construction can figure out the nuts and bolts of it. But yeah. There's no way to sugarcoat this. This is probably the Preds' worst game of the season.
Yeah, this was atrocious. This was really not great. And we always start out when we have a game, we start out with our, one word to describe the game. And I really feel like I have nailed it today. My one word is bean boozled. So I don't know if you are familiar with Jelly Bellies, the little.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jelly Belly made a game and it's called Bean Boozled. And they make several different colors of jelly beans that look exactly alike, but one is delicious and one is something horrible. So they have one that's like a light orange color and it's either peach or it's barf. They have a green one that's either lime or lawn clippings. They have like a lighter green one with some speckles in it that's either juicy pear or booger.
So this is like Harry Potter's Bertie Bott's every flavored beans.
This is it. And you spin a spinner and it says, pick up a light green Jelly Belly and pop it in your mouth. And you might get lime. You might get lawn clippings. You might get chocolate, you might get canned dog food. Went into this game thinking that we were going to get a juicy pear Jelly Belly because, the Predators were coming off of a solid win in Anaheim. The LA Kings blue line was depleted. There was this kind of vote of confidence from David Poile and John Hines about the trade deadline. But what we really thought was going to be like a buttered popcorn Jelly Belly turned out to be a rotten egg Jelly Belly. We were completely bean boozled.
Yeah, the word I did bean boozled. I did not know that was a thing.
Oh,
kind of curious about it now.
Again. Oh, I've played it. It's not a game for the faint of heart.
As a Harry Potter fan who loves the concept of Bertie Bott's every flavored beans, this is something I'm intrigued about.
Okay.
I'm not going to do it right now. But if you and I are ever at some sort of cocktail party or giant Preds shenanigans at a bar someplace,
there you go.
We're gonna bust out Bean Boozled.
Yes. Yeah. You won't forget it.
I apparently might not if I get a odd flavored bean. My one word to describe the game was, I guess, 2 words: Friday afternoon. Because we all know the feeling you get after a long day at work on a Friday afternoon. It's been a long week. You've put a lot of hard hours in. You're tired. You're exhausted. You really don't care what happens for the rest of the day after like 1 o'clock on a Friday. you're coasting to the weekend. This is like your turn off all your notifications time. If you work from home, maybe you go and sneak a hour out on the golf course to get the weekend started right. You don't care what happens at work. Like, let's be honest. If anything happens between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. on a Friday afternoon workday, you don't care. You're like, whatever. Like,
Yep.
I'll get to it next week. The Predators had a very strong Friday afternoon
Oof.
vibe to this one. You know, they're coming off a win over Anaheim. They already had a very long game the night before, which was followed a very long cross-country road trip. Right after they played Saturday night at Bridgestone, there's a lot of travel. They're already tired from the game. They got a lot of people out. Forsberg
Yes.
and Josi and Duchene are all breaking records. And by the end of the game, you could tell this was like the Predators just kind of playing to get through it, you know?
Yes.
This was one where it's just like that you could tell right. And this isn't one of those things where, you know, you and I talked yesterday and how the key to the game was going to be a strong finish because we thought
Yes.
the Predators were going to come out strong, but maybe be fatigued at the end.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't even come out strong. Like they looked fatigued from the get-go.
Yes.
And, you know, I think, you know, the second period was interesting, but I think right after the Kings made it 4-1, like 5 minutes into the third period, you could kind of see the attitude shift a little bit for the Predators from, okay, like let's keep fighting, let's finish strong, to let's just get to the final buzzer in one piece.
Yes. And, you know, I feel like we need to apologize because maybe we weren't clear yesterday when we said get off to a hot start. We were directing that at the Nashville Predators and not at the LA Kings. So maybe that's a little bit our bad. I would agree with
Adrian
you.
Kempe is a big listener of the Locked On Predators podcast, apparently.
We need to really be more mindful, I think, Nick. But I feel like what you said, I felt like in the second period when Philip Tomasito scored and we were just a couple goals down, it was 3-1. Okay, this is something the Nashville Predators feel like this is doable. When we dig deep, this is doable. And it went from doable to dumpster fire in the third period so quickly. And it was the first time that I feel like we saw what you're talking about. I feel like this is one of the first times we've seen Nashville go, let's just get through this. Let's just get to the end of this game. We know it's not going to be great. And it sort of looked like they lost a little bit of their oomph and they really limped to the finish. This finish, this third period of this game was some of the most excruciating Nashville Predators hockey we've had to watch this season. I mean, so painful. So painful. And I have many questions about some of the decisions that were made. Many questions.
Like what?
So talk to me and tell me your take on going empty net with 7 minutes left in the game. And it's a 4-1 game. Talk to me about this one, Nick. What's your take on making that move?
Well, I mean, you kind of had to do it, right? I mean, I guess maybe. I mean, it's once they made it 5-1, you know, you could kind of be like, okay, they probably need to do something now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, right after doing it right after that Kings goal was a choice.
It was a choice.
I think at that point it was kind of a, you know, maybe John Hines was kind of the same mindset as what we were thinking, you know, which was, you know what, like we're clearly kind of limping to the finish line here. We're either going to go all out and put some pressure on them right now, or we're just going to kind of fold it in here. So it was a choice.
It's an interesting choice.
And I know there's a lot of people, especially in the advanced analytics community, who really love the prospect of pulling your goalie early. You know, and you're kind of seeing him, you know, transition. Used to be like, you know, it was the last minute of the game. That was when you like did your last minute rush. Now we see teams kind of doing it as early as 2.5 to 3 minutes left in
Right.
a 1-goal game, which is interesting. 7 minutes left in a 5-1 hockey game.
It's a choice.
Not really sure. Yeah, like not really sure what the deal with that is.
Yeah.
So
And maybe it was a vote of confidence or something from John Hines, like, hey, look, I think we can come back from this. But it just fell. I mean, obviously it fell so flat. I mean, it so didn't work, but it seemed very out of the box for John Hines and for Nashville. It just, I felt very confused by that choice.
it is. And there's some other things that we'll talk about here in a second,
Mhm.
including what happened to the Preds' top line, because they were
Oof.
noticeably outplayed in this game. Plus, look at some other teams in the Western Conference and what they did on the NHL trade line. Who's the Preds' biggest threat now? That's going to be an interesting conversation. First, though, want to mention that today's show is brought to you by our friends at HelloFresh. With HelloFresh, you get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. So that helps you skip the trips to the grocery store. Instead, count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. Most of you guys pretty much know how it works, but if not, here's kind of the gist. HelloFresh delivers pre-portioned ingredients right to your door, including farm fresh produce that arrives within a week, so you get convenience without skimping on quality. And again, it helps you, avoid all those long lines at the grocery store. You don't have to fight with anybody on Sunday afternoons to get the last can of whatever that you're looking for. And also, you don't need to worry about wasting food. Yeah, that bag of spinach you have in the back of the fridge, you know what I'm talking about. It's not going to get easy for HelloFresh because they measure all ingredients perfectly. If you're losing weight or trying to get more in shape, HelloFresh has fit and wholesome recipes for satisfying, nutritious meals that can feel good about, with 6 recipes a week to choose from, including low calorie and carb conscious options. I know I use HelloFresh. It's delicious. I love it. I have the almond crusted chicken this week. All I have to do is, I'm a household of 1 person, so I usually get 2 servings, cook 1 up, store the portion I don't eat that night for a nice little lunch the next day. That way, less cooking for me. HelloFresh is a proud partner of the Nashville Predators and fueling hockey fans everywhere. So go to HelloFresh.com/LockedOnPredators16 and use code LockedOnPredators16 for up to 16 free meals and free gifts. Again, that is code LockedOnPredators16 for up to 16 free meals and 3 free gifts. Yep, we are talking about the Predators' big 6-1 loss to the Los Angeles Kings. Not as delicious as a HelloFresh meal, Anne.
Oh, no.
The question we have to ask is, where was the top line last night? Because they had been on such a roll. Forsberg, Johansson, Duchene, Mikael Granlund also, alternates out there in the power play. They got beat by the hodgepodge of LA Kings forwards pretty much in all aspects of the game.
This was rough. And, our good friend Brian Baston, who does stats at On the Forecheck, he and I have talked extensively about the plus minus stat and how it's a little bit of a sham. It's a lot of a sham,
but not
it's
our plus minus.
Not the Monday plus
That's
minus.
great.
Fair point. The NHL plus minus, but I wanted to take a look at it and talk about it because I think it goes to what you're saying. Filip Forsberg was a -2. Matt Duchene was a -2. Tanner Jeannot was a -3. Now, granted, when a team is scoring 6 goals, your minus is going to go up. But it's when those goals were scored and against whom and how that I agree with you is a little bit baffling. The first, that kind of star line really wasn't there. Roman Josi had 1 point, so he continues his point streak. And it feels a little weird to be down on Roman Josi for not having like a 3-point game.
Yeah.
But he
He's
really
only
struggled.
1 point last night. Awful. Just
Like,
awful.
I'm going to need you to try a little, Roman Josi. So we have to sort of frame that up in the sense that, we're looking at Matt Duchene, Filip Forsberg, Roman Josi having these just accelerated, outstanding statistics recently. But this was rough. Roman Josi struggled to find the net. They just weren't connecting well. The big guys didn't come up big in this game. And I think that's going to be an issue if it continues into any sort of playoff hopes that the Predators have, because so much of their success relies on Forsberg, Duchene, and Josi.
Yeah, it was jarring to see them get beat to almost like every loose puck.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Every puck battle they lost. They looked very slow
Mm-hmm.
compared to the LA Kings. And they're not known as like a super speedy team like Tampa Bay or anything. Like, yeah, they have some fast guys, but they're kind of known more for like their positioning, their prowess, their kind of two-way play. And so it was very interesting, and it kind of ties into why I thought, maybe this is a case of just the Preds getting tired, maybe taking their foot off the gas a little bit, or just being gassed, because it was noticeable how much faster and quicker the Kings looked than them last night. And yeah, in a case like that, you look towards somebody like Filip Forsberg or Matt Duchene to kind of be the spark, to kind of take the team and lead by example a little bit, use your skill set to kind of take advantage of opportunities. And they didn't do that last night.
No, there was a void when it came to things like momentum plays. Even Philip Tomasino's goal, which was, it was a really interesting little goal he had there, kind of a low swing to get it past there. But even that really did not spark any response out of this Nashville Predators team. And you may be right. This could very well be a case of just travel fatigue, game fatigue, just emotional fatigue from the record setting and the record chasing and the, all of the hoopla. But there weren't any plays that really were momentum shifting plays. This game started out with the momentum quickly for the LA Kings, and the Predators never could interrupt that and could never get control of that back. And that's something that we haven't seen from them. They've usually been able to spark something in a game. And like you said, it's often been Forsberg, Duchene, Josi that's done that. It just didn't. There was none of that this game.
On defense, Mark Borowiecki unfortunately hurt again. That is a huge loss, considering it also sounds like Dante Fabro might miss a few games. And we were just talking about this the other day when we were talking about the Jeremy Lauzon trade. The Preds' defensive depth has not been there this year. The top six have been phenomenal.
Yes.
From everybody from Roman Josi to Alex Carrier to Dante Fabro down to Benning and Borowiecki. But now all of a sudden, it doesn't look like you're going to have Borowiecki for a while. And again, we're not sure of the full extent of his injury, but it didn't look good last night. Matt Benning is still out for the time being, and Dante Fabro now is nursing some sort of injury. So all of a sudden, you're losing 3 of your top 6. And that brings up the question, Anne, like, is this team deep enough on defense to get the job done in this next little stretch run of games?
It's definitely concerning. And this is something I didn't anticipate the Nashville Predators wrestling with, especially when it comes to defensive depth, because in Milwaukee, there has been just so many players defensively who have been in the development process and who have really been shining, but they haven't seemed to draw from that very much. And when you're down now, like you said, you're down Benning, you're down Dante Fabro. It looks like Borowiecki's going to miss some games. all of the sudden there's this huge void and you're asking people to step in and fill this void. And I think, people have been very critical of the defensive depth this season. And, I can understand some of that criticism. There is a void there now, and we're 2 days past the trade deadline, and while they did pick up one defenseman, and I think he's kind of a long-term investment that David Poile sees, so he's, going right into the game, and this is a good opportunity for Lauzon. This is a little concerning at this point in the year for the Nashville Predators, and all of a sudden, a position that we felt like developmentally there was a ton of depth, we're kind of looking around like, hey, what are we going to do here?
Yeah. And the other thing with depth is not just, somebody a step in because of injury. In a meaningless game last night, well, by the end of it, meaningless, Roman Josi, 28 minutes.
Yes.
And then you look at Matthias Ekholm, about 25 minutes. Like the depth isn't just, if somebody's injured, you need them to step up. The depth is playing well enough that you can play critical moments and give somebody like Roman Josi or Matthias Ekholm a rest. We know Josi can handle it. Like we know Josi and Ekholm can both handle it. They've both guys that have played close to 30 minutes a game before. But, in a game like this, coming off of back-to-back, that's not ideal.
No.
Like you would want, like in this case, you would want somebody. And obviously, it's different when you have an injury in game. But, the depth for that was you want somebody to step in so your guys don't have to play 28 minutes. So, when you're in that stretch run going down the stretch in the season and in, the last 5 minutes of a game, you can throw any of your 6 guys out there and know that they are going to do the job you asked them to do. That's to me the bigger depth than just, somebody might be injured, somebody might need a break, here's somebody to fill in. It's somebody that can fill in and play meaningful minutes. That to me is where the concern over depth comes from, Anne. Because, Jeremy Lauzon, they've obviously given him a lot of responsibility early on. David Poile has talked him up, so we know they trust him. Do they trust like Matt Tennyson to step that up? Is Jeremy Davies, if he winds up coming back into the fold, which, if Boro and Fabro are both out for a while, it looks like he might. Is Ben Harper going to be somebody that the Preds trust? And if the answer is no, if they're only going to play like 10, 12 minutes a night in a critical game, then at that point you have to look and say the Predators' defensive depth just isn't there.
It's a big ask of your big guys to not have that kind of support on the back end for the defense. I would agree with you. It is a concern, and I think this is kind of a worst case scenario for Nashville. I think the expectation was that we were going to get Boro and Benning back in time for kind of the late playoff push. And when we have a healthy top 6, like you were talking about, this is a good top 6, but it's a little concerning if we're dealing with these same injury situations or extended minute situations down the stretch. There are some definite defensive issues and questions when push comes to shove in this lineup. I wanted to ask you about David Rittich. How did what was kind of your takeaway from his performance in the game?
Clearly not all his fault, but I also think UC Saros makes a couple of those saves.
Yes. Yeah.
And obviously, UC Saros and David Rittich are 2 completely different people, 2 completely different players. One is on the run of his life. The other is, kind of a solid NHL backup. But, like we were talking the other day, in these must-win games, if you see some of these performances that Rittich's been putting up over this past couple games, is that enough to have you, if you're John Hines, trust him enough to play him in the second game of back-to-back? Or is UC Saros now all of a sudden going to be the guy that Hines has to go to? And it's like, look, we're playing you from here on out, barring
Yes.
something catastrophic.
Yeah, I felt kind of like you did. I don't feel like these goals were all David Riddick's fault. I think there were some significant defensive breakdowns in a number of these goals. But I also feel like when you look at the Anaheim Ducks game, there were saves in the first period when the Ducks kind of had momentum that UC Saros made that kept the Nashville Predators in the game. That's not ideal. That's not how you want your team to function. You don't want them to be under pressure and under the gun immediately in the game. But if they are, I feel like UC Saros keeps you in that game, and you might not have that same experience with David Riddick. So it's just something to keep an eye on. And I think we're going to see UC Saros in net, you know, in these big games significantly. So that's something to watch, the amount of time, you know, in games that Saros has his workload. Another thing we want to keep an eye on, though, is what's happening in the rest of the Western Conference. You know, we've talked about what the Predators did at the trade deadline, but we need to talk about what's going on in the Western Conference with some of these other teams. And that's what we're going to do in just a minute. But first, I want to talk to you about our friends at Built Bar. You know, this is the time of year. Girl Scout cookies are out. We're all tired of going to the gym. We're starting to kind of give up on those New Year's resolutions, and we need easy, simple solutions to keep us focused. That's where you need Built Bar. Have you tried their Built Bar Puffs? These are one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. They are the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They are real fluffy. They're not just a protein bar, it's a treat. It's like a dessert, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors, including cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, and banana cream pie. All Built Bars, just like the Puffs, are covered in 100% real chocolate. They are low calorie, they are high protein. You can go and replace your cookies and your candy bars with a Built Bar. You will enjoy the taste, and they are better for you. Go to built.com and you can scroll down, look at the macros chart for yourself. You'll be blown away with the protein content, the low calorie, the low carb. You can compare them to a candy bar, and it's no contest. They have great flavors. They have mint brownie, coconut almond. They're all delicious. They have new flavors coming out all the time, so be sure to check their website frequently. Go to built.com and you can use our promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your order. That is promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com.
It is Western Conference Wednesday, and
Mhm.
we are taking a look at some of the Preds' rivals and what
Ugh.
they did at the NHL trade deadline. A mixed bag. A mixed
Mhm.
bag, to say for sure, compounded by the fact that I think a lot of people weren't necessarily happy with what the Preds did at the deadline. So when you look at the West, who's
Mhm.
a team that you think really aced the deadline, knocked it out of the park?
I'm going to go with the Calgary Flames. And this has been a slow burn to greatness for them. It's not that they made a ton of moves right at the deadline. They've kind of been building towards this. They got Tyler Toffoli kind of early. They got Callie Yarncroke, our good friend from Seattle. They claimed Brad Richardson, who we're familiar with off of waivers. And I thought this was an interesting grab for them. They got Ryan Carpenter, who was rumored to perhaps be in the mix with Nashville, and Calgary got them. I think it's very clear Calgary's going all in, and they should. I think they're very smart to shore up what is going to be a team that's going to go for a cup run. So I feel like Calgary long haul has really had a good vision for the end of the season. And I feel like they have nailed their trade deadline action.
Yeah, I mean, they had to go all in,
Yes.
basically, just because of so much uncertainty about the team following this season.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't blame them. In that same vein, I really love what both the Colorado Avalanche and the Minnesota Wild did.
Yes.
Two teams the Preds are
Unfortunately.
currently chasing. For the Avalanche, I think a lot of people were kind of disappointed that they didn't land Claude Giroux. I
Mm-hmm.
know that is somebody the Avalanche had been eyeing for quite some time, but they still have plenty of top end talent. But what they did was bring in a lot of depth. Andrew Cogliano, we know, is kind of a cornerstone for a lot of NHL teams in the third and fourth lines over the past decade or so. Arturi Lehkonen, who was, we know he can excel in the playoffs because we saw him do it last year with Montreal. One of Montreal's best under the radar guys last year. They bring him in. They bring in Josh Manson, who fine. He'll probably be just kind of like the bottom of the depth guy. And they also took care of cap. Like they did a cap move. They traded Tyson Jost for Nico Sturm, a much cheaper contract over the next couple of years, but kind of, in terms of player style, a parallel move. So yeah, Joe Sakic definitely did a lot of balancing acts here. Not only did he set him up for a good run this season, but by trading Joe's contract for Nico Sturm's, he's all of a sudden putting Avalanche in a better position to maybe do something this offseason, maybe a bigger hockey move. And then when you talk about the Minnesota Wild, I mean, one of their big inconsistencies was goaltending, and they wound up getting Marc-Andre Fleury on a pretty solid deal. I mean, it should tell you that, Marc-Andre Fleury, who was very hesitant about moving, was sold on the idea of the Minnesota Wild being a legitimate contender this year. They also got Jacob Middleton from the San Jose Sharks, who is a very, good depth defender, somebody that I think will complement Jared Spurgeon and Matt Dumba very well. So yeah, if you're, a Preds fan looking up and seeing that you're going head to head with the Minnesota Wild, trying to get that last sure-in top 3 spot, you have to be very concerned right now.
It's definitely intimidating when you look at what Minnesota has done and compare it to what Nashville maybe didn't do. Two very different approaches. And like you said, in this tight playoff race, it gives one pause. It really gives one pause to see what, Colorado and Minnesota have done. Now, there are some teams that sort of whiffed a little bit at this trade deadline in the Western Conference. And of course, we talked about this yesterday, but I can't help but revisit it. The Vegas Golden Knights. Bless your sweet hearts. This is just a dumpster fire, and it's only entertaining because it doesn't involve the Nashville Predators. Yes. If this is your team, this is excruciating. But, somebody once said, if you mess with the bull, you get the horns. If you're kind of playing around with your cap space and you're thinking you're going to solve your problem at the trade deadline and it doesn't work, you are in what is scientifically known as a hot freaking mess. And that's where the Vegas Golden Knights are. Bless their hearts, as we say down south. But this did not happen like they thought it was going to happen. This was not what they thought was going down. And it's a big oops.
It's like, that meme out there where it's like, oh, well, if it isn't the consequences of my own actions.
Yes.
The Dadonov no trade thing might not be the Golden Knights' fault.
No.
Which is going to be very interesting to see what the ultimate decision with this is. But this is still a situation of their own creating. They're the Icarus. They're the Icarus of the NHL. They weren't supposed to be good their first year, and they made it to the Stanley Cup final. And I don't know if this is just hubris from George McPhee and Kelly McCrimmon. I don't know if this was Bill Foley, the owner, stepping in and being like, you know what, we have what we need. I want to go in all in now. But they have bought and bought and bought and bought all these big contracts. And it's kind of like taking out a loan to pay off your credit card debt. It's fine to kind of take risks now. But the more you do it, the further you go. Eventually, you're going to have that come to Jesus where you're going to have to pay the piper all at once. And that's coming for the Golden Knights. And I think the big thing that makes the trade deadline a failure for them is that they waited this long to do it. If the Dadonov, if they void this Dadonov trade, the Vegas is screwed.
Mm-hmm.
Because look at all the people they have on long-term IR, Max Pacioretty, Mark Stone, Alec
Yep.
Martinez. They don't have the cap space to bring them back. And, I know like after watching like the Tampa Bay Lightning, everybody thinks, okay, well, we'll just wait to the playoffs and then there we go.
Right.
They might not get there. They
Right.
are playing awful right now. They're out of a playoff spot. They've lost something like 18 of their past 24, something like that. It's a horrendous stat. And you're going to need your big guns that are on long-term injured reserve to just make the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think in past years, there's been some teams that have quote unquote helped Vegas out, so much like that they're willing to take a contract for, a decent draft pick. That is
Mm-hmm.
going to be a lot harder to do this year because you look, all of a sudden Max Pacioretty is injury prone the past couple of years and he has a big
Right.
contract. Vegas is going to have to give up assets to have them take that off the book. So who knows what is going to happen for the Vegas situation, but that's awful.
It's a hot mess. It is a hot, steaming mess. And from the outside looking in, it's a little bit interesting. I dare say almost fun to watch because it really, like you said, it's you work in the system and all of a sudden the system workaround may not work. And here you are. So,
Yeah.
we'll have to see how that all sifts out.
Yeah. Can I end doing something a little different? So we know there's a lot of teams that were sellers at the deadline in the West.
Mm-hmm.
Can I end with a seller that I thought was
Yes,
a great deadline? And that is the
absolutely.
Seattle Kraken.
Yes.
I think they kind of thought maybe Vegas-ish this year. They didn't get what they wanted in the expansion draft. They didn't get the future capital they thought they were going to get just because I think teams really wised up after the last expansion draft. They
Right.
kind of went for it, signed a couple of big pieces this year. Clearly, that's not working. So they did everything else right. They have stockpiled picks.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a couple of guys like Daniel Sprong, who is going to be good, but mostly they sold off a lot of assets they probably weren't going to keep around anyway, like our buddy Colin Blackwell, Mark Giordano, Kelly Yarncroke. We know Jeremy Lazan, but
Mm-hmm.
actually got a lot of significant capital for them. And it's something like they had 25 picks in the next two drafts or something like that. So they put themselves in a position to start over.
Yes. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. The whole Vegas expansion experience, I think, has skewed a perspective on what it means to start an expansion team. And I think Seattle really is very wise in what they did. They kind of need a do-over and to come at it from a different way, and they executed that at the deadline really well.
Yeah. Speaking of the Vegas Golden Knights,
Mm.
guess who the Nashville Predators play tomorrow?
Oh, yes.
They are in Vegas. We're, of course, going to have a preview of that game. Look ahead to some things that the Preds need to fix going into this final stretch run. And what's your confidence level for the rest of the season after last night's shaky performance? That's all coming up tomorrow. Until then, Ann, where can everybody find you?
You can find my work at ontheforecheck.com, and you can find me on Twitter at AnnK_Mama on Ice.
You can find me on Twitter at _NS Morgan. Read my work at ontheforecheck.com. Follow the podcast on Twitter also at LO_Predators. And if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to like the video, share it, leave a comment. Helps other Preds fans find this content as well. Let us know what you thought of the show, or just tell us a future topic you want us to discuss. That's going to do it for us today on the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We'll be back tomorrow with more Preds talk.